My name's Claire. I'm 38, live in rural Missouri, and I teach third grade. I'm not rich. I don't drive anything with eco in the name, and the fanciest thing I own is a bread machine that I got during a depressive spiral last winter. I've been married to Dean for 14 years. He's quiet, sweet, the kind of man who still opens the car door for me and will literally pause a football game if I want to talk. So imagine being married to that man and sitting across from your own father while he calls him stupid to his face. It happened 10 years ago, Thanksgiving at my sister's house in Independence. There was a turkey, a cheese ball shaped like a hedgehog, and all the classic dysfunction stacked like a Jenga tower, just waiting for one wrong move to make it crash. Dean had just lost his job. Factory layoff. Not his fault the whole plant got gutted. He was already applying to everything under the sun, from auto parts stores to overnight stocking at Walmart. It was humiliating for him. I knew that, and I told my family beforehand, don't mention it. Don't make it worse. Should have known better. My dad, Tom Jensen, 6 feet 2 inches of cowboy-booted ego, beer gut, and loud opinions, was already a few whiskeys deep when he zeroed in. We were halfway through dinner when he leaned back, puffed out his chest, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I raised my girls to be smart. You know, pick good men. And then Claire goes and marries someone who gets fired 'cause he's too stupid to be useful. Ain't that right, Dean? Just like that, the table went dead quiet. Even my sister's bratty kids froze, mid-mashed potato. Dean? He blinked, looked down at his plate, and didn't say a damn word. His jaw clenched, though. I saw it. That tight little twitch in his cheek. He didn't want to cause a scene. Me? My ears went hot, like kettle steam hot. My hands were shaking under the table. And the worst part? No one said anything. My mom muttered something like Tom under her breath. My brother chuckled nervously. My sister gave me one of those awkward ugh, dads like that shrugs. No one defended Dean. No one told him he was wrong. That silence? That's what killed me. I stood up, slowly, took Dean's hand, and we left without saying a word. Just grabbed our coats and walked into the cold like it was a lifeboat. I cried in the car, mostly out of rage. That night, I blocked half my family on Facebook. Dean told me it was fine, that he's just an old man, don't let it get to you. But I saw the way he avoided mirrors for weeks. How he kept telling interviewers he could learn fast. How he stopped smiling when he talked about work. That was the night something shifted in me. I didn't scream. I didn't throw punches. I just decided one day I'll make him regret that sentence. And 10 years later, he gave me the chance. All I had to do was open the door. After that Thanksgiving, we went nuclear. I don't mean screaming or lawsuits, or some you'll regret this soap opera moment. I mean total radio silence. No calls, no Christmas cards, no updates when I got promoted or Dean found work again. Just a hard, clean cut. We moved 2 hours south to a quiet town near Lake of the Ozarks. Population: you get weird looks if your shirt doesn't have camo on it. The kind of place where the gas station also sells bait and the post office is inside someone's living room, I swear to God. But it was peaceful. And that's what we needed. Dean ended up getting a job at a local hardware store. It didn't pay great, but he liked it. People liked him. He fixed lawnmowers on the side, helped neighbors rebuild fences after storms. He always had paint under his fingernails and tools in the backseat. He looked alive again. That quiet pride you only see in men who work with their hands. As for me, I started teaching at the local elementary. 3rd grade. One of my students gave me a rock once and told me it looked like the moon and God. I cried in the teacher's lounge. We made a little world for ourselves. Small house, squeaky floors, porch swing. Dean installed one hot July. We didn't need anyone else. Especially not my father. But even in peace, there's that little ache. You know the one. That bitterness that curls under your ribs when you remember how people should have treated you, but didn't. Every once in a while I'd see someone on Facebook post some cutesy photo of dad and daughter day, and I'd feel it, the urge to type out a whole essay and delete it just as fast. I'd hear my siblings were still around him. That my brother helped him get a new truck. That my sister brought her kids over every Sunday. No one ever reached out to us. It was like we'd been quietly erased. Dean never pushed it. He never said a word about my father again. Not after that night. But I knew it lived in him too. I caught him one evening, sitting on the porch, just staring out at the road. I sat down next to him and said nothing. And after a while, he said, "You know, I never really hated the man. I just hoped one day he'd tell me I wasn't a mistake." That was the only time he ever acknowledged it. It hurt. Not just for me, but for him. For the way men like my father make themselves gods in their own homes and forget that their words don't just disappear. They rot. They grow mold. They poison the ground beneath them. So yeah, I buried it. I planted something else over the pain, a new life. Love. Stability. I gave it sunlight and silence. But here's the thing about rot. It waits. And when it rises, it begs for your help like it never broke you. I just never thought he'd come back to my door, years later, pretending it hadn't happened. It was a Tuesday in March when he showed up. I remember because I'd just gotten home from school and still had dry erase marker on my hands. I was halfway through reheating leftover chili when I saw the car pulling into the driveway, too clean for any of our friends, too slow for a stranger. The kind of slow that says, I don't know if I belong here. I opened the front door, and there he was. My father, Tom Jensen. He looked small. Smaller than memory. His once thick gray beard had thinned out, patchy. His shoulders were hunched forward, and he was leaning on a black cane like it was the only thing keeping him from folding in half. There was a spot of dried blood near his collarbone, like he'd nicked himself shaving and just didn't care. And he had the audacity to smile. "Claire," he said, like he was surprised I still existed. I didn't move. I just stared. Dean was still at work. It was just me, him, and the wind catching the porch flag. I didn't know where else to go, he said, and then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he stepped forward and tried to hug me. I stepped back. That was the first moment he looked hurt, like I'd slapped him. Not because he was actually sorry, because he wasn't used to consequences. My father always assumed forgiveness was automatic, that love came baked in no matter how deep he cut. I asked him why he was there. He looked past me into the house like he was expecting a warm welcome. Or maybe he was checking for Dean. "I need help," he said. He didn't even try to sugarcoat it. Turns out, Tom had been diagnosed with early-onset dementia 2 months prior. His second wife had passed away the year before, ovarian cancer. I hadn't even known she was sick. The medical bills were stacking up. His Social Security barely covered groceries, let alone in-home care. My sister helped where she could, but she was juggling 2 kids and a divorce. My brother was MIA unless there was an inheritance to sniff out. And now here he was, on my porch, asking the daughter he humiliated, disowned, and ignored to bail him out. No apology. Not even a half-assed, "I miss you." Just, "I need help." And I'll admit it, I smiled. Because that was the moment I knew. He didn't remember what he did to Dean. Or if he did, he thought time had smoothed it over. That I was the kind of person who'd just moved on. Who'd let it slide because he had a cane now and trouble remembering where he put his car keys. He thought he could cash in on the family loyalty he'd burned to ash. And so I let him in. I made coffee. I offered him a seat. I even tucked a blanket around his legs because the bastard was shivering. I let him think the world had forgiven him. And while he was sipping from the mug like an old man in a holiday commercial, I was already planning his end. If you ever want to know what power feels like, try pretending to forgive someone who doesn't even realize they need forgiveness. That first week, I played my role to perfection. Smiling, listening, nodding through his stories. I even pretended to be touched when he said, "You've always been my most sensible one." Dean was wary at first. Of course he was. But he trusted me. When I told him I thought maybe it was time to reconnect, that maybe Dad didn't have anyone else left, he looked me in the eye and said, "I trust you, Claire. Just don't let him take anything from you." It wasn't a warning. It was permission. So I helped. I drove him to his doctor's appointment at the local VA clinic in Colombia. He'd qualified for care there after his brief military stint back in the 70s, 2 years of maintenance, work at a base in San Antonio. Just enough to get benefits, not enough to ever shut up about it. In the car, he talked nonstop. About the good days, about how the world was falling apart, about how my generation couldn't build a damn shelf without YouTube. Same old Tom. I listened. I asked questions. I nodded at the right moments. At the clinic, I noticed he struggled to sign his name. His hands shook. His memory drifted a little. The doctor mentioned stage 2 dementia. Still functioning, but the decline had started. Time was ticking. Perfect. Back at his house, if you could call it that, I took stock. Piles of mail on every surface. Utility shut-off warnings. Prescription bottles rolling under the recliner. A sink full of dishes that looked like they'd been there since Halloween. And it smelled like mildew, piss, and old meat. I cracked a window and almost gagged. While he napped on the couch, I took photos of everything. Not because I was scared for him. Because I was building a file. I created a private folder on my laptop labeled "For Later" and dropped everything in: unpaid bills, expired medication, bank statements I found shoved between couch cushions. I took photos of bruises on his shins and the stain on his mattress, not to help, but to prove something later. I knew how the system worked. In Missouri, if you want to trigger an Adult Protective Services investigation, you don't need to scream or cry or make a fuss. You just need documentation. Let them draw their own conclusions. And in the meantime, I kept visiting. I brought food, set up his pill organizer, wiped down counters. I made it look like I was the daughter he always wanted me to be. He called me his rock one day. I almost laughed in his face. He never asked about Dean. Never once said the man's name. And I realized it wasn't that he didn't remember the insult. It's that he didn't care. The things he said, the pain he caused, it meant nothing to him. Dean was just background noise in his mind. Disposable. But to me, Dean is the only man who ever treated me like I mattered. So I treated my father the same way he treated Dean. Like a stepping stone to something better. And soon, I'd make sure he knew just how that felt. I'll admit it. At first, I thought I was just going to sabotage him a little. Make things uncomfortable. Let bureaucracy eat him alive slowly while I smiled sweetly through it all. But then I opened his mail. It started with a shoebox in the hall closet. It was half covered in old mechanic gloves and a stack of ancient tax returns held together with a rubber band that had melted into the paper. The box was unmarked, just sitting there like it hadn't been touched since the Bush administration. Inside, receipts, credit card statements, loan letters, and lies. So many lies. Turns out, the medical bills weren't the full story. Not even close. My father had been taking out payday loans for over 3 years. Fast Cash, Loanzilla, all the bottom-of-the-barrel predators that charge 30% interest and call you every hour like it's a hostage situation. He owed 5 different lenders, each more bloodthirsty than the last. One letter had final notice stamped in red across it, and it was 3 months old. Then I found a debt collection letter from a casino down in Oklahoma. Apparently, he'd taken out a $10,000 line of credit under his wife's name before she passed. I remembered she used to crochet church blankets for cancer patients. That woman didn't even drink, and he was gambling her name into a debt spiral while she was dying. Classy. There were also sketchy transfers between checking accounts, always just before they'd overdraw. A few checks bounced. One from a vet clinic, another from a pawn shop. But the worst part? There were 3 life insurance policies in his name. All lapsed. Every single one. He hadn't made a premium payment in over a year, which meant that when the time came, there'd be nothing. No legacy. No help for funeral expenses. Just bills and mold. I sat in his filthy recliner with all the papers spread around me like a reverse seance. I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt clarity. All his arrogance. All his sermons about personal responsibility and real men pull themselves up, it was a mask. A pathetic, fragile mask barely hanging on. This man, who called my husband stupid, couldn't manage a checking account with direct deposit. This man, who told me Dean was a burden, had been leeching off everyone for years. And now he wanted me to fix it. That was the moment I stopped thinking about what I was doing as petty. It wasn't petty. It was surgical. I took photos of the lapsed insurance notices. Saved PDFs of the overdue loan statements. I started organizing it all in a spreadsheet like I was prepping for trial. Because honestly, I was. He thought I was soft. That I'd forget. That I'd throw money at the problem and call it family duty. He didn't know I was building a noose. Not a literal one. A paper one. And when the time was right, I'd let him hang himself with it. If there's one thing public education teaches you, aside from how to survive on 6 hours of sleep and coffee from a crusty mug with a crack down the middle, it's how to navigate bureaucracy. Forms, systems, delays, petty rules that trip people up if they don't read the fine print. It's not revenge by fire. It's revenge by paperwork. And I was ready to bleed this man out by it. I started with his Medicaid application. He'd qualified barely, but he hadn't followed through. So I offered to help. I sat at his sticky kitchen table with its ancient ketchup bottle centerpiece and filled out every field like a doting daughter. Crossed every T. Even uploaded his income docs for him. Then I submitted it to the wrong county office. Twice. It wasn't a huge mistake, just enough to delay processing by a couple of months. When the confirmation letter finally did come in, I intercepted it from his mailbox and forgot to give it to him. When he started complaining about missed calls from social services, I gave him the "you must have dreamed that" routine and offered to handle follow-up. Of course, I never did. His home health consultation got pushed back. His prescription refills started bouncing around pharmacies. I claimed the computer system was messed up. Dean asked if I needed help, and I told him I had it under control. And I did. Then came the bills. I called the utility companies and updated his mailing address to mine. He didn't notice because half his mail ended up unopened on the floor anyway. He started missing due dates and got slapped with late fees. Then disconnection warnings. One morning, he called me in a panic because the water had shut off. "I paid that bill," he shouted. "No, Dad," I said, as calm as a summer pond. "You thought you did. Maybe write it down next time, remember." And that's the key: never act malicious. Be concerned. Be gentle. Like a hospice nurse watching her patients slowly fade. I told my siblings about his worsening episodes. Dropped phrases like "confused at night" and accusing the TV of stealing his wallet. They all had their own issues: kids, divorces, bankruptcy. No one had time to check. I offered to take over his care. They thanked me. One even called me a blessing. "Oh, honey, you have no idea." I let the house rot around him. I stopped bringing groceries. let his fridge empty out. I'd show up with a bag of fast food and say, "Oh, you're still out of bread," like it was a mystery. And the final touch? I sent an anonymous tip to Missouri Adult Protective Services. The photos I'd taken. The prescription records. A concerned neighbor email outlining his forgetfulness, his neglect, his unsafe living conditions. I even mentioned the time he'd left the stove on overnight, which, yes, I had quietly turned on myself. It was just enough to warrant a wellness visit. A visit that would snowball. He still thought I was his angel. He had no idea I was the one pulling the rug out from under his shaking legs. And when they came knocking, he'd have no clue which way was up or who had opened the door for them. The wellness visit came on a Thursday. 2 women from Adult Protective Services knocked on his door just as he was microwaving a frozen Salisbury steak. I wasn't there. I made sure of it. But I'd coached him that morning, told him if anyone official showed up, they were probably just routine checks. He didn't even ask why. He just nodded, shuffled back to his recliner, and turned the volume up on Wheel of Fortune. They found the sink full of rotting dishes. Mold in the bathroom. Prescription meds mixed up in the wrong pill bottles. His toenails hadn't been trimmed in months. He'd forgotten the name of his own pharmacy. And when they asked who managed his finances, "Oh, my daughter Claire. She's got it all under control." Perfect. The state flagged him for follow-up. Scheduled a cognitive evaluation. Started whispering about guardianship. And while they were setting up the chessboard, I decided it was time to knock over a few pawns, starting with my brother. Ethan, the golden son. The one who never got lectured at the dinner table or blamed for anything more serious than forgetting to mow the lawn. My father once said Ethan had a mind for money, which was hilarious considering Ethan had filed for bankruptcy after investing in a luxury vape startup. But he still had that ego. Still thought he was entitled to something. And I used it. I called him one evening, made small talk, then dropped a casual line like a lure. "Dad keeps talking about this old safe in the garage, says there's cash in it. I think he's losing it, but who knows, right?" Silence. Then, like clockwork. "Wait, what kind of cash?" "I don't know, Ethan." He mumbled something about savings bonds. Honestly, he might be hallucinating. "Just thought you should know." I hung up before he could dig for details. 2 days later, Ethan drove in from Kansas City. Said he wanted to visit Dad. Didn't call ahead. Just showed up. Convenient, right? He spent half the day in the garage. Claimed he was reorganizing Dad's tools. Didn't find anything because there was nothing to find, but the paranoia was planted. The next week, my father started hiding his wallet under couch cushions. He accused the mailman of stealing his AARP catalog. I stoked the fire. When my sister called to check in, I told her Dad was starting to mistrust Ethan. Says someone moved his things. By the end of the month, my siblings were barely speaking. My father was increasingly confused, agitated. He once called me crying because he thought someone had stolen his truck. The truck had been repossessed. I hadn't told him. Every bit of chaos I sowed came from their own rot, their own greed. I didn't have to plant it, I just watered it. And when Adult Services finally decided it was unsafe for him to live alone, I smiled, drove him to the state-funded nursing facility, and promised to visit soon. He clutched my hand and said, "You're the only one who hasn't betrayed me." He wasn't wrong. I hadn't betrayed him. I'd punished him. The state facility was tucked behind a gravel road outside Sedalia. It looked more like a high school gymnasium than a place for the dying. Tan cinder block walls. A parking lot with more handicap plates than windows. The kind of place that smells like overcooked peas and stale bleach the moment you step inside. I waited 2 weeks before visiting. Let him settle. Let the reality of the place soak in. Gray food trays, shared bathrooms, buzzing fluorescent lights at 2 a.m. The walls in his room were bare, save for a cheap poster of a sunset taped above the radiator. When I walked in, he looked up from his recliner. There was a blanket tucked tight around his knees and one of those 24-hour news channels blaring nonsense at a whisper. His face lit up like I was Santa Claus and a resurrection rolled into one. "Claire," he said, smiling. "I wasn't sure if you'd come back." I didn't smile. I sat down on the edge of the hospital-issue bed. The mattress hissed under my weight like it didn't approve. "Are you comfortable?" I asked. He nodded. "It's fine. They feed me. There's a nurse named Kathy who's real nice. She helps me with my socks." I looked around. One plastic chair, chipped linoleum floors, and a heating unit that made a clicking sound every 4 seconds. "Home sweet home," I said. He gave a soft, sheepish laugh and said, "I guess I deserve worse." I tilted my head. That caught my attention. "Do you?" I asked. He blinked, squinting like the words had shape. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking. Maybe I was too hard on Dean. Back in the day, when he lost that job, I was angry. I didn't want to see my daughter married to a man who couldn't provide. That's how I was raised. Men work. They build." "He did work," I said quietly. "He does work. You just weren't looking." Silence. "I never hated him," he added. "Just didn't think he was good enough for you." I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "No, Dad. You didn't think I was good enough to make a decision without your approval. You thought your words still meant something when all you gave me was shame and silence. You stood in front of people I loved and humiliated the man who gave me everything you never could." His smile faltered. Something in his face cracked, fear, or maybe recognition. "You didn't come here just to check on me, did you?" he asked, voice trembling, like he finally saw the wires. I stood up, straightened my coat. "I came to show you what it feels like when your choices catch up to you." He opened his mouth to speak again, maybe to apologize, maybe to beg, but I was already walking to the door. "Oh," I added, pausing just before I left, "Dean sends his regards. Said to tell you he doesn't lose sleep over cowards anymore." And I left him there, in that tiny room, staring at the poster of a sunset that looked like it was fading even faster than he was. After that visit, I never saw him again. Not in person, anyway. He started writing me letters. The first one arrived a week later. Sloppy cursive on legal pad paper, folded twice into an envelope addressed in crooked Sharpie. No return address, but I recognized the facility's mailroom stamp. The letter was pitiful. That's the only word I have for it. He didn't apologize. Not really. He said things like I didn't know what I was doing and I was raised differently. He said families fall apart sometimes, but blood is blood. A line that always makes me want to throw something. As if blood is some magical insurance policy against being a bastard. He said he was scared. He said he missed his house, his truck, his privacy. He didn't say he missed me. I didn't write back. The second letter came 2 weeks later. Shorter. Angrier. He said he didn't understand why I was punishing him. Said maybe I was always ungrateful. That I'd let my husband make a fool of me. That one went in the trash unopened after the first paragraph. The third letter was just a page with the words, "I'm sorry," written 6 times, like a kid forced to write lines on a chalkboard. The handwriting trailed off at the bottom, as if he got tired. Or forgot what he was doing. That one I kept. Not because I forgave him, but because it looked like surrender. And sometimes you want to hold proof that the mountain finally bowed its head. He stopped writing after that. Word got around to me through the grapevine that his health was declining. That the state was moving him to a memory care unit. My sister texted once. "He asked for you." I didn't respond. What would I say? That I already gave him more of me than he ever deserved? That I spent years trying to swallow the weight of his disappointment like it was my job to earn back something he never had the right to take? The truth is, By the time the revenge was done, I didn't even feel rage anymore. Just relief. It was like walking out of a burning house and realizing the cold night air is the first thing you've truly felt in years. Dean never brought it up. Not once. He just held me tighter at night. Watched my face while I slept, like he was making sure I hadn't vanished under the weight of it all. The house felt quieter. Not empty clean. Like something had been exorcised. Sometimes I wonder if Dad even remembers what he said all those years ago. The sentence that started it all. The knife dressed as a joke. But it doesn't matter. Because I remember. And now? That's enough. There was no obituary when he died. At least not one anyone paid to print. He passed away 6 months after the state moved him into memory care. I didn't find out right away. The nurse called me a week later. She was polite, soft-voiced. Told me he went in his sleep, no struggle, no visitors. She asked if I'd like to collect his things. I told her to give them to Goodwill. There wasn't much anyway. A few flannels. A worn-out Bible with half the pages underlined in red. Some old army photos. A cracked coffee mug that said "Number 1 Dad" in faded letters. Probably something my sister bought on a gas station whim 15 Christmases ago. I didn't cry. Grief only comes when love has somewhere to go. My love for him burned out years ago. What was left was a shadow. Something that passed through me sometimes, especially in quiet rooms. But it didn't stay. Dean and I went out to dinner that night. Nothing fancy, just ribs and cornbread at a local place where they know our names and ask about my third graders. On the way home, Dean turned to me and said, "You okay?" I thought about it. The years. The silence. The way my father had taken up so much space in my mind, even after I left him behind. The way I'd shaped my life around staying away from him, proving him wrong, unlearning his voice in my head. "I am now," I said. He reached over and squeezed my hand. That's all he needed. There's a myth we tell ourselves that closure means confrontation. That there's going to be some dramatic moment where the villain begs and you get to drop a one-liner and walk away like a movie star. But sometimes closure is quieter. It's realizing you don't need anything from the person who hurt you. Not apologies. Not ashes. Not peace treaties scrawled in cheap ballpoint pen. You just need to know that their power over you is gone. That the chains are dust. Now, when I sit on our porch, watching the sun dip below the soy fields, I don't think about what he took. I think about what we built in spite of it. A home. A marriage. A life that doesn't revolve around surviving someone else's damage. Dean leans back in the chair next to me. The wind's soft. There's a dog barking somewhere down the road. We don't talk much. We don't need to. He once said he hoped my father would tell him he wasn't a mistake. But in the end, he never had to hear it. I was the proof. And my father? He was just another man who thought cruelty came free. Until he found out it always has a cost.